JoAnna Mendoza on tonight with us. She's actually running for election to the Arizona State Senate to represent District 11. So we have a real life political candidate here. So we're very excited. So we definitely want to jump in. We also have Sydney, who's a friend to Reclaim Our Vote, who comes on frequently, and she's also going to have a little blurb that she's going to speak on about immigration reform. My name's Carmen. We've got Ross, we've got Kyle, and then we've got Sydney, like I said, who's going to join us a little bit later and talking about reform. We also have our partners, Be an Ally and Black Boys Recycle. I think we're going to skip over their intro for tonight just because we have a super special guest and I want to make sure that we get through everything. But again, per usual, if you all are not following at Be an Ally _ on Instagram, please do so. They've created a directory for action. And then we also have at Black Boys Recycle, who recycles narratives and paradigms and ideas, and also does pop-up installations and activations here on the local level in Los Angeles, but of course hope to aspire and grow. Before we do jump in formally into our weekly on Wednesdays forum, I just want to let everybody know that on our Instagram page, there has been some kind of friction with another Reclaim Our Vote that is slightly different in their handle. And so there's just been some bubbling and some friction that's been going on, and the claims that the name has been stolen, and that's obviously not the case. So we are working that out with them. We would love to even partner with them. We own the domain Reclaim Our Vote, also with the Twitter and the YouTube, and obviously our Instagram handle. Theirs is just slightly different, and it's seeming like it's becoming a little bit of an issue. So we're trying to navigate that. So if you guys see anything that pops up, we here just want to let everybody know what's going on and to be transparent about that. And, if you want to reach out to us, we're happy to talk about it or have our discussion at the tail end of our forum like we do, usually. So we're happy to talk about it there. But like I said, we don't want to stop this from actually getting our mission done, which is empowering one another to get to these polls, these polling stations, and be able to vote with dignity, with intellect, with knowledge, and with the full capacity that we can and that we will. So that's always been our mission. And of course, to uplift our Black voices and, even our minority communities. And so this is also why we're having our talk about immigration today, because we need to know what we can do to help our fellow brothers and sisters to navigate this American modern world in a better light. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass it on over to Ross, who will tell us a little bit more about JoAnna, and she's going to take the floor. So thanks again for coming.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, like Carmen said, it just means so much to have you guys here with us every single week. We just love having you and having these conversations. And if you're here this week, it is particularly special because we, as Carmen mentioned, have an incredibly special guest. Little backstory, when I was working in Texas on Beto O'Rourke's Senate campaign, one of my colleagues who became a very dear friend, Robbie Medell, he's a field organizer with me at our Dallas headquarters. And Robbie's brother, Nick Medell, was not working for the campaign in a professional capacity. However, he might as well have been, because he was volunteering constantly, was working with the college program with the Beto campaign to organize college-age voters, to register college-age voters, and he literally would just do anything that the campaign needed him to do. We knew that we could call on Nick at any given moment, and he'd be there for us and for Beto. So the family moved to Arizona, end of 2018, early 2019, and Nick, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but he moved to Arizona and got connected with our special guest, JoAnna Mendoza, and began working with her campaign ahead of her primary. And JoAnna, as Carmen said, is a powerful Latina veteran in Arizona, from Elroy, Arizona, who is running for the state legislature. And if you've been to a Reclaim Our Vote before, you know how incredibly important state legislative races are. We've talked about the census and how they drastically impact how many state legislative seats you get. They are the Congress for your states and states' rights and state laws and things like that. So making sure that these representatives, that these state senators and state assembly people and state representatives resemble the states in which they represent is #1 priority. And JoAnna is an embodiment of someone that needs to be representing Arizona, representing her community. And without further ado, I am so happy to pass it on to JoAnna and let her introduce herself. So JoAnna, please go ahead and unmute yourself and take it away.
Well, thank you so much, Ross. Thank you, Carmen. Thank you, Reclaim Our Vote. And thank you, Medell Brothers, for connecting me with this amazing opportunity. They're amazing, and they have done so much work for our communities and our campaigns, and I got to give them a shout out. And before we begin, I just want to point out that my campaign manager, Chesney Richter, is here as well. I got to do that because she does so much amazing work and works really hard to keep this campaign going and our momentum going. So a little bit about me. I am from Arizona. I am from a small rural community. I consider myself a small town kid, and I'm the daughter of farm workers. And I was, you know, in the cotton fields at a very young age, working in the hot Arizona sun along with my parents. And despite how long and how hard they worked, they still couldn't make ends meet. And we still found ourselves on government assistance programs like food stamps and Section 8 housing, Access, which is Arizona's Medicaid program. And I was the kid on free lunch at school. And I make it a point to tell that story, to talk about my roots and where I came from, because it is the story of so many working families living in the district and across our nation today. We have folks who are struggling to make ends meet, who have to make tough decisions about whether to pay for healthcare or childcare, or whether to pay the first month's rent or to pay another utility. And so it is, you know, I'm someone who definitely came from some very tough roots. For me, it's very important to acknowledge that, and also to acknowledge that we still have people living in the district today that are in even worse shape than what I remember growing up in. And, you know, at a very young age, I received the calling, what we call the calling, and that was a calling to serve my country. And I will share with you that my mom was completely against the military. I was raised by my stepfather, who was an immigrant from Mexico, who was later naturalized under the Reagan administration during the Amnistado, the amnesty program that provided a path to citizenship for about 3 million folks. And yes, he was a Republican, but he provided a pathway for citizenship. So I think it's really important to point out that he did that. And my stepfather was one of those immigrants that was naturalized under that administration. And so my parents, my mom was completely against the military. She had seen what had happened to Vietnam veterans who were coming back from Vietnam, how they were being treated, and just the trauma that they were incurring while being in a war zone, right? And we really shouldn't have been in Vietnam, but that's a whole nother story. And so I wanted to serve, and I was determined to disobey my mom and disobey my parents and serve our country. So I actually ended up serving in 2 branches of service, the United States Navy for 1 enlistment, which is roughly about 3 years. And then I moved on I came back to our communities, and I wanted to continue to serve in that capacity because it's such purpose-filled work that I stepped it up a notch, and I decided that I really wanted a more of a challenge, and I joined the Marine Corps. And my mom was like, "Are you freaking crazy? Like, why are you joining the Marine Corps? Like, that is the, you know, they're the fiercest fighting force in the world, and you want to be part of that organization. Are you okay?" And I said, yes, because if I'm going to do it again, I want to be part of the best and the best of the best. And that's what I did. I've been forward deployed to Iraq twice, and Afghanistan once for an almost year-long deployment. I've led men and women in that environment. I've been responsible for people's lives, which it's not an easy task as a leader. You have to find a way to balance the missions for success and also take care of the people that are entrusting you with their lives. Does that sound familiar? Kind of like what we're experiencing right now with COVID and the crisis and everything that's happening with the world. And so the type of leader that you want in that position is someone who is a servant leader, who will always put the mission first, who will put the mission first, but put people always. And so that was always my motto, is mission first, but people always. And we want to prepare the people that we serve to understand that there are risks that you're going to take when you are in a position to serve your country in uniform, or you're in a position to serve your communities in some way. But you want to prepare them for those risks. So you want to educate them on what we're up against. You want to be very transparent on those risks and what that means. It could be life, right? But you also want to give them the tools and the resources that they need to be successful, to go forward and accomplish the mission. Seems like we have a little disconnect there in our government right now with that on varying levels, right? From federal all the way to your state and your local, where they don't understand that and would rather push those decisions off on your local government, your local municipalities, rather than just take the bull by the horns and make a decision that they know that some people may not be 100% on board with, but they're doing it for the greater good and for the safety of those that they've been elected to serve. So what opened my eyes is, after military service, I came back home to Arizona with my son, who is now 4 years old. And I wanted to put down roots back here in Arizona. I'm a single mom. You know, just didn't work out, and you know, it is what it is, and I rolled with it, and I'm doing the best that I can, just like all single moms who are holding it down for their kids across America today, right? Across the world. And so I put down roots back home because I had family here and I wanted to come back to Arizona. And I was just shocked at what I saw. I had a really hard transition into civilian life because I couldn't get a job. I was told that in some cases, my military resume, I was either overqualified or I didn't have the skill sets to do certain jobs. Now, mind you, I did everything in the military. You name it, I probably did it on some level or some capacity. And I was still being told that I could not hold certain positions. I even got told by a local municipality, because I wanted to continue to serve in government in some capacity. So I applied for a lot of jobs in like our government, you know, local government, county, and state. And I got told by one local municipality that I should probably go drive trucks. Now, driving trucks is a completely respectable and honorable job. Do not get me wrong. What was very alarming about that statement was that they didn't realize, they weren't looking at my resume. And my resume wasn't written in military terms. They weren't taking the time to actually really look at my experience and see how it was translatable or relevant to the job and the position. So I got a little sour. Luckily for me, I was able to secure a position working with adults and children with special needs who needed homes. This agency also was a third-party contractor through the Department of Child Safety in Arizona. And we worked to place children who had been removed from their homes as a result of abuse or neglect. Purpose-filled work. I mean, I love that job, but it was super tough. And if you've ever worked with people in some capacity, there's something called compassion fatigue. And you don't leave it at work, you bring it home. You're constantly thinking about how to solve problems. You're constantly thinking about the folks that you're trying to help. And it got to a point where I had to make a decision, because it was really starting to affect me in my I guess my everyday with my son. After you hear of some of the stories of abuse and neglect, you can't get it out of your mind. It really does traumatize you. And I was heartbroken to have to leave that position, but I made the best decision for me and my son at the time. And so I left, and I eventually found my way to a congressional office, working for Arizona's first congressional representative, Tom O'Halloran, who's still the current representative. And I was a caseworker, and my specialty was military and veterans. But if you know anything about our congressional offices and their responsiveness, they're usually understaffed. Everyone's underpaid, and they've got a lot of stuff to do. And so it was there that my eyes became open to what our communities were up against, because Legislative District 11, which that's the seat that I'm running for state senate in that district, falls within Congressional District 1. So I was already actually working on our communities, helping folks, connecting them with resources, sometimes having to find a way to bring agencies to the table who didn't think that they needed to sit at the same table and talk about issues that were affecting them, and also try to find a way to navigate our state agencies as well, because I will share with you that some state agencies do not like when the federal government gets involved or when they get a call from a congressional office about something that may be problematic or needs to be looked into. And so it's a lot of relationship building, because you certainly want to be able to pick up the phone and connect your constituents with, you know, someone at that agency, so that folks don't have to get the runaround and then they get upset, and then they think that all of government sucks and that government doesn't work for the people. And so I wanted to be able to pick up the phone and say, hey, you know, Susie, I've got Mr. Smith here who needs help. Can I send him right over? And who does he need to talk to so he doesn't have to wait in line, right? So my eyes were wide open, and I started to toy with the idea. And I use that term very loosely because people like me do not run for office. Kids like me who were raised in poverty, who fought their way out of poverty, usually don't come back to their communities. We don't, if we're lucky, we make it out of our communities, but we usually don't. We usually end up doing into some other stuff because of the lack of resources available, the inequity, right, in our communities of color, in our impoverished communities. So people like me don't step up to run for office, and we have not seen that in this district. We have not seen elected representation in this district for such a long time. So I said, you know, I'm gonna step in. I'm going to do what it takes to make sure that people understand that they have an option and they have a choice, and that they can actually have elected leadership who's going to listen to them, who is going to make decisions that are based on science and data and real stuff and not politics, and who's going to really genuinely care about them to solve problems. And that is where I'm at. I mean, we've had a tough fight. It hasn't been pretty. I will tell you that sometimes you question, like, why, you know, you're just like, you see the negativity in the politics, you see how people behave towards each other, the divisiveness, the hate. And I didn't grow up like that. Like I was, and even in my time in the military, like we don't act like that. We're very respectful and mindful of each other, even if we don't always agree with each other, or we don't necessarily like each other personally. We know that there's a mission to accomplish, and we work together to get that done. And so I'm always, every day I'm shocked at the stuff that I see in politics, but that is the road that needs to be paved to move forward and to have elected leadership in this seat and across the board. There's so many Democrats who are running that are doing the same thing. I mean, we've had to deal with racism. We've had to deal with sexism. We've had to deal with, I mean, you name it, we've dealt with it. And it has been a very tough road to get here, but these are the sacrifices that need to be made in this district. This is not a check in the box for me. This is not a, I'm on, you know, this is not a number on my bucket list. These are the communities I grew up in. This is personal for me. I'm not doing this because it's a power grab, because I wouldn't be putting myself in a situation as a single mom, having to make sacrifices every day and decisions every day, if I didn't firmly believe that our people deserve better, that everyone across the board deserves better. So the fight is on, it's real, and we need folks to help us. We need, you know, we need as much help as we can possibly get. It is nasty, it's divisive here. The individual that I am seeking to replace, Mr. Vince Leach, is not a nice person. I like to talk negative about people. He's not a nice man. He is not invested in our communities, and we need to get him out so that we can actually elect someone who's going to do the work of the people, actually going to take action. So that's my spiel. Hopefully I didn't put anybody to sleep.
Not at all. Not at all. Thank you so much, JoAnna. That was incredible. I mean, your story is incredibly inspiring, and everything you're doing to make your community better, make Arizona better is really wonderful to hear. For us, what do you want Reclaim Our Vote to know? What do you want everyone on the Zoom to know that they need to do? I mean, Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, Arizona has a Republican trifecta right now, correct?
Yep, and they're battleground state.
Exactly, they're battleground state electoral colleges coming right through Arizona. You have a U.S. Senate seat up, correct?
Yes.
What can we as Reclaim Our Vote do to not only help you and your campaign and make sure that you get elected, but help Arizona as a whole? Please tell us.
Yes. So I think it's really important to recognize that, yes, while the U.S. Senate seat is absolutely imperative and important, all the down ballot races are equally as important. We, you know, in stepping up, we also energize the base, and we energize folks to get out and vote, right? So one of the issues that we've seen in Arizona in the primary was, yeah, we had a historic turnout, but also people are filling out the bubble at the top, and they're saying, okay, we want to vote for Mark Kelly. Great, boom, turn it in. No, people need to be aware that down ballot races are just as important. Yes, particularly in Arizona, because that's where, I mean, this is a battleground. We're in a fight, right? This is a battleground state. But across the board throughout the US, just remember that yes, down ballot races are equally as important. My ask of you is to amplify our message. Join us for virtual phone banks if you can. We need to reach as many voters as we possibly can to get out the vote, to make sure that people understand what's at stake. If they've been asleep, right, for a little bit, because maybe they're working and they don't have time to look at what's happening with politics. So we need to make sure that we're engaging them and keeping them engaged in the momentum in this fight. So volunteering, if you can't do a phone bank and you can't do any of that, because, you know, people have a million and one things going on, we're asking you to donate $20.20 to help us get our message out, to help us build our voter outreach program. To every dollar that you donate will go directly to connecting with voters and getting our message out. And if you can amplify our message on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, please do that. Tell 5 friends, tell them to follow us, tell them to share our message. We have actually built quite a little bit of a social media presence in the last couple of months, which I'm extremely proud of. And engage youth, our young folks, engage our seniors, engage everyone. And so that's my ask of you today. I think Chesney's going to drop our information in the chat box. And anything that you can do would be extremely important, especially in a battleground state like Arizona, where the down ballot races are equally as important as a U.S. Senate race.
Well, JoAnna, we are a small but mighty little team here at Reclaim Our Vote, and I know that every single one of us is going to do all we can to amplify that message and make sure that come November, you win that seat, and we do big things in Arizona.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. And thank you for having me and being able to share a little bit about myself and my fight. And you guys keep fighting the good fight. Keep up the great work. Small but mighty is correct. And so I love that. And keep fighting the good fight. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much. Feel free to stay and watch the rest of it, but you are busy. You have a campaign to run. Chesney has a campaign to run. So
Yes.
Get to work and bring us a victory. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'll have to excuse myself, but keep doing what you guys are doing, and I appreciate the opportunity. All right. Bye. Everyone.
Carmen, back to you.
I mean, we're just having political candidates come and speak to us personally. I don't know about you guys, but we're doing great things, great work. Like, this is our 7th forum, you guys, and we have people who are running, who are coming, who want to speak to us and get energized and have us, you know, do what we can to amplify their voice, and so that way we can just be all on the same page. And at the end of the day, that's what it's about. It's about being on the same page and fighting. We're all fighting the same people, so we can't get distracted about, you know, who's doing what. You know, we're all, you know, moving forward, and that is the number one goal here. So I'm just personally excited that that was able to happen. So thank you, Ross, for, you know, pulling your strings and doing what you got to do to make it happen. So we always appreciate you. And I thought that was so cool. So definitely check out the links and stuff that were dropped in our chat, and, you know, do what you can. But I really enjoyed hearing her story and what she's about. And we need to see more women specifically, and women of color, out here representing and dedicating their lives to change and to, you know, turning things around. So that was amazing. And we're gonna keep on going and keep on fighting and learning and growing as we do per usual. I believe that we're gonna have Ross. Are you gonna go ahead next? Is that?
Yeah, sure. I'll keep it brief. Y'all heard enough from me tonight, but since we're talking immigration, I mean, like, obviously, like JoAnna mentioned, I mean, it comes through Arizona, it comes right through Texas. It's our whole country. It's based on immigration. We're a nation of immigrants, right? Some people choose to forget that. But that's what we are. And coming here and and making this country your home and making our communities your home is what we're all about, or what we should be all about. But I just wanted to kind of lay out the two candidates and what their immigration policies are. We're going to be brief because, I mean, like, one candidate has one thing to say and one candidate has a completely different thing to say. So I'm just going to highlight the major policy points in each. I took one for the team, and I went ahead and I went to www.donaldtrump.com, and I took a deep dive into his immigration platform. And let me tell you, one, it's pretty difficult to find, just generally. Like, the website is trash. Not that anyone is surprised, but like, finding the policy points was difficult because there's like 3. So they bury them. But the best part was the website's just full of caps locks. There's so many caps locks everywhere. It's just like, promises made, promises kept. That's how they started out. And then it's protecting the American people and our homeland. I just want to go through. So, like, basically it's just not bullet point after bullet point of like, fighting brown people for you. So the major thing he talks about is, of course, like his bread and butter, the wall. So it's like, right when he got in there, he started fighting for that wall, and he's got secured funding for 424 miles, the 722 miles of our southern border. So, like, that's the first thing he wants you to know, that he's still doing it, that it's happening, that's going to get done. He also wanted to make sure that everyone knows that, you know, under his leadership, he is going to end that DACA program as quickly as possible. He's going to wind it down legally, because he's been told he can't do it the way he wanted to, through the Department of Justice, to make sure that no more DACA recipients no longer exist. And that the Deferred Action for Parents of Americans, the DAPA program, was completely rescinded. So that he wants you to know that, like, don't worry, there's not going to be any more Americans made out of these folks when I'm around. He also declared a national emergency along our southern border to stop immigration stuff from going on there. And he disqualified sanctuary cities from receiving federal grants. So that's like the first thing he wants you to know. And then he just goes on and on about U.S. border security and how he's going to increase funding for law enforcement, for ICE, for Border Patrol, that he's you know, making sure that Mexico supplies their own National Guard to secure our southern border, so that no Mexicans from there or South Americans or Central Americans can come in through the Mexican border. And that he's going to increase, like I mentioned earlier, ICE broadly, 10,000 new ICE agents and 5,000 Border Patrol agents, which is, where is that number? Because it's a crazy number. It's in the billions that it would cost to increase. $98 million in grant funding to hire 802 full-time law enforcement officers just for the DOJ. So that's not even ICE or Border Patrol. That's just additional DOJ officers to deal with, you know, all the people he wants to get out of here. Then what does he go into next? Oh, just much more about ICE, much more about ICE. And just like, there's nothing, I want to reiterate that there's nothing that he's going to do. It's all just what he's done. I'm not sure if there's anything new on this website at all, in any way, shape, or form. This is all just things that he's been able to do so far. So that's kind of like the greatest hits list of that. There's not much going on. Like I said, lots of cap locks and lots of racism, AKA Donald Trump's whole thing. And then I went over to Joe Biden's website to take a look at his. He recently, like last week, rolled out the Biden agenda for the Latino community. It was a whole policy platform underneath his Build Back Better plan, which we talked about a couple weeks ago. So they are within these key pillars, but then he adds in specifics for the Latino community, that how he's going to expand policies or add policies that directly address problems that the Latino community faces in this country. The first one is within the Affordable Care Act. So 20 million Americans gained health coverage under the Affordable Care Act, and the largest community, the largest community to receive an increase in coverage was the Latino community. 4 million Latinos were added health coverage under the Affordable Care Act. So he wants to obviously expand the Affordable Care Act and add in a public option to the Affordable Care Act, so expand and improve. But he also wants to double funding for community health centers and for Planned Parenthood, because they are the main places that the Latino community goes to receive healthcare treatment, which I think is really important. Then the economic portion of the plan, basically he wants to acknowledge and shout from the rooftops that America's economic success is directly correlated to an increase in the Latino workforce, that we are nothing without our Latino workforce, and making sure that that is recognized and then compensated for. So they actually, Latinos account for more than 80% of our labor force participation. But they are obviously at the moment stuck in mostly lower wage jobs, and they have lower rates of home ownership and just generally overall lower wealth because of that. So he wants to, first things first, bottom line, increase the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour. Making sure that he improves overtime benefits, and that he gets rid of non-compete clauses and gets rid of unnecessary licenses that hold people who would be able to get a job otherwise from getting that job, which is very important, especially in vocational careers. And then for education, this is the one I think is so incredibly important, because in America now, I think 1 in every 4 students in our public school systems is a Latino student. They are increasingly, the Latino community is increasingly represented in our education, but our education system writ large, which we also talked about a couple weeks ago, is completely unprepared for that. There's not the language training amongst our education officials or educators generally. And the resources available to the Latino community when it comes to pre-K and childcare is slim to none. So he wants to make pre-K available to every child and triple funding to Title I schools. Just generally making sure that teachers have access to resources for Spanish-speaking children and Spanish-speaking families. And then also increase the number of social workers, counselors, and other school psychologists to give children that are coming from Spanish-speaking backgrounds and their families what they need to make sure that they can be successful. Then to higher education, he wants to provide 2 years of community college without debt across the board. And importantly, under his plan, Dreamers will qualify for some of these educational resources for the very first time, which is huge. He'll make an unprecedented $70 billion investment in Hispanic and other minority-serving institutions, as well as historically Black colleges and universities, which is so crucial. A few other things just quickly. Increasing support for survivors of gun violence and funding for the school counselors to create trauma centers and trauma support systems in our Black and brown communities versus just private institutions that have the resources for those. And then also just really investing in our green economy, which will, one, provide millions and millions and millions of jobs for green energy and green climate energy companies to people who will be, who need them, but also making sure that our Black and brown communities who are adversely impacted by climate change have more of a leg up to combat those effects that are negatively impacting their communities. So I went a little bit longer than I thought, but you know, choices for me pretty clear. And if you haven't watched Joey and Auntie Kamala give their presser today, please just go check it out. Just go check it out. It was pretty great. And with that, Carmen, I'm
very
done.
exciting, very exciting stuff. I did not see it, but you know what? It seems promising. And, I'm here for it. So I'm definitely going to check that out. It's also just important parts of our political situations that are going on. So just things that as an adult I should watch. So thanks for that reminder. And also thank you for, doing that deep dive and going into uncharted territories where, many of us have never gone before, into the deep dark web of Trump world. So it just sounds like I don't know, like a skit or something with all the caps.
You know what? While I was there, I did get to load up my shopping cart and then bail. So I at least screwed up his merchandise and inventory.
Oh my goodness, you're gonna get some emails now saying, hey, you forgot about something. Those are very pestering. Okay, guys, well, this hour's going really fast. We've already breeze through the majority of our time here, but we do not want to waste another minute before getting to our girl Sydney, who always got the lowdown for us. And I know this was a topic that she felt passionately about and that she had expressed interest of speaking on with us today. So Sydney, what you got for us, girl?
Hello. Okay. The reason I am interested in this, and I will amend my statement from before, Ross. I guess I'm talking immigration reform, but I'm talking immigration reform from 1986 up until and possibly through Obama, and like why we are where we are. The reason I am passionate about this is because both of my parents are immigrants, and my father came here in 1965, which is the same year that LBJ passed the Immigration and Nationality Act, right after the Civil Rights Act, which is like a very important moment. And that enabled my 17-and-a-half-year-old father to come here from Haiti, get a job, eventually work towards naturalization, and then brought my 4 aunts and uncles and my grandmother, my grandfather, and some cousins and a bunch of people. Like the only reason that the Saintes are here is because of that moment. My mother left her home country of Trinidad in the 70s. Thank you, Ross. In the late 70s. Another interesting time for immigration, and also just for the United States of America, period. But my mother used to work for the UN. Spent 31 years working for the United Nations as a broadcast journalist. When you decide to work for the UN, you around the time that she was deciding whether she was going to apply for citizenship, she got that job. And basically you either become a representative of your country and they give you a G4 visa, which is what she did, or you become naturalized and then you become a representative of the United States. She didn't want to be counted as a US representative at the UN. She wanted to be a Trinidadian. And it comes with a couple perks, like an education grant. They every other year, they paid for us to spend the summer in the Caribbean visiting my family. It did a lot of amazing things for my upbringing and for my life. But now, having lived in this country longer than she lived in her home country, is having to apply for citizenship. And it's crazy. She filed something crazy, like over 70 pages of paperwork. And because they reprinted her name wrong, she had to refile it. It is the most ridiculous bureaucratic, I won't go into it, but process of applying to become a citizen of this country, even though this is a person who's lived here for 35 years at this point. It reminds me of the way that people would try and block Black Americans from voting, asking questions like, how many bubbles are there in a bar of soap? It's not literally like those, that's not what's being asked, but it's just really interesting. I couldn't name all the monuments. The citizenship test is insane, and most of us who are born here would not pass, which we all know. Moving on. Let's start with the fact that this country has a really wild, I don't know why people are still shocked that we struggle with race and immigration. In 1924, one of the most important immigration acts, one of the first immigration acts of the 20th century that would influence the next 50 years, included an act called the Asian Exclusion Act, basically saying nobody from Asia could move here, which is wild. Also, just so y'all know, 1924, that act gets passed. A week later, in 1924, is when Native Americans are granted citizenship in the country that we stole from them. Okay, I hope you just let that land real quick. Amazing. So fast forward, let's fast forward to 1965 when this matters. I know, that was the worst fact I've ever learned in my life. Anyway, great. The beginning of like actual sort of reform. 1965, Immigration and Nationality Act. It ends preferences for white immigrants dating back to the 18th century. And when they say white immigrants, they're excluding Eastern European countries because at that time it was considered like, ideally you would be from a Nordic country. Wild, insane. Okay. It eliminated national origin, race, and ancestry basis as basis for immigration. It created a 7-category preference system, which did give priority to relatives of US citizens and legal permanent residents, and to professionals and other individuals with specialized skills. Immediate relatives and special immigrants, aka like ministers or former employees of the government, foreign medical graduates, etc., were not subject to those like numerical restrictions, but whatever. Yeah, this doesn't make sense to me, but whatever. It substituted hemispheric limits for earlier national quota system. For the first time, immigration from the Western Hemisphere was limited, while the Eastern Hemisphere saw an increase in the number of visas granted. And refugees were given the 7th and last category preference, was with the eventual possibility of adjusting their status for the first time. Again, this is the same year that my father emigrated and left Haiti that was under a dictatorship at that point, which is one of the reasons why, funny, sad story, my grandfather was the dictator's mechanic, and eventually it got a little nuts, and that's why my family had to come here. Anyway, then we go to the 70s and 80s, an estimated roughly, I would say probably more, but 2 million, like this is where you start seeing quote unquote illegal immigration. Although that dates back to like prohibition with bootleggers and things like that. That's when you really see people starting to like secretly come into this country. I was always confused by the word illegal. Undocumented also like doesn't make sense to me. So I kind of I kind of looked up what that actually means requirement wise. Basically, it's 4 things. It means by unauthorized entry, by failure of an employer to pay a worker documentation fee, by staying beyond the expiration date of a visa or other authorization, and then by violating the terms of legal entry. Those are the 4 things that would put you in the category of either undocumented or quote unquote illegal. Then we get to in the 80s, early 80 to 82, there's a recession. And then it's very short. And then Reagan, I'll just put it this way, Reagan, quote unquote, fixes everything. And then the decline of US manufacturing, like even though employment grew by 19 million jobs in the 80s, the strength was uneven because 3/4 of the increase was in services and retail trade, but like actual labor, like mining and manufacturing, completely obliterated at that point. So if you didn't have a certain level of education, it was really difficult for you to get a job. My father lied on a couple different job applications and got a bunch of great jobs because he was good at math and he sort of hopped on the technology train early. And then after 9/11, like right before the recession, as they were going through layoffs, they looked and he didn't have a degree and he got laid off immediately, which is crazy to me, but I get it. Anyway. Beep, beep, beep. Then we get to 1986, the Reagan administration's Immigration Reform and Control Act. Also, all of these acts, I think it's really interesting, like depending on the president, the administration, the wording of the act is wild. Like the fact that Reagan calls it the Immigration Reform and Control Act is very specific. So on the one hand, he did provide amnesty to illegal immigrants who are already here. But on the other hand, he started sanctions for people who knowingly hired them. He made it a crime to hire them, and increased border enforcement, and basically, and like was doing 2 things at once, right? Creating pathways for permanent residency that made it a lot easier than before, but then was also making it much harder to exist here if you weren't a documented citizen. Blah, blah, blah. Also, really quick, contrary to what everybody believes at this point, because this is when, you know, you've got a lot of evangelicals coming through, you've got a lot of anti-immigrant sentiment. And a 2015 study found that the legalization of 3 million immigrants in that time period reduced crime by 3.5%. So although many people's excuse for being anti-immigrant is because, you know, they're coming and they're taking our jobs and they're killing all of us and they're committing crimes. This is terrible what I'm doing, but you know, I'm self-aware. Although that is an excuse, it is also statistically wrong. Beep. Then we get to 1987. Reagan issues an executive order legalizing the status of minor children of parents granted amnesty under the immigration overhaul, essentially announcing a blanket deferral of deportation for children under 18 who were living in a two-parent household with both parents legalizing or with a single parent who was legalizing. That action affected like 100,000 different families, which is great. Then in 1988, we get to the introduction of the term aggravated felony. This did not make sense to me, still doesn't really, but we'll get there. In 1990, I'd say roughly 6 million illegal immigrants entered the US from the 90s, from Mexico, the Philippines, Vietnam, Dominican Republic, and China primarily. I also think it's interesting that there are all of these statistics. Like, how do you know? How do you have these numbers and how do you know and where do they come from? Like, we can barely fill out the census as citizens. Like, beep. Anyway. In 1990, George Bush's act is just, Senior, is just called the Immigration Act. He increases immigration ceilings to allow 700,000 immigrants to come to the US per year for the fiscal years 92 to 94, and then 675,000 the year after that. He provides temporary protections for immigrants fleeing unsafe home conditions and genocide. And that's another thing, between 1970 and 1990, you're having a lot of post-colonial political overhaul in countries all over the world, which is why a lot of people started to leave their home countries. One of the reasons. The act also lifted, this is 1990, everyone, the act lifted the English testing process for naturalization that had been imposed in the Naturalization Act of 1906 for permanent residents who are over 55 and have been living, but only for people who are over 55 and had been living in the United States for 15 years as permanent residents. It tripled the number of visas for priority workers and professionals with US job offers. This is all 1990. Then in 1991, a peak in crime rates leads to increased numbers of police, increased numbers of imprisonment. The war on drugs ramps up with crack. And here we are at the beginning of the rising sentiment, negative sentiment towards undocumentation and crime, et cetera, that leads us like closer and closer to today. I didn't know this about California. In 1994, California Prop 187 was a ballot initiative to establish a state-run citizenship screening system and prohibit undocumented immigrants from using non-emergency health care, public education, and other services. That's 1994. That did not get overturned, I believe, until the early 2000s. Anyway, then in 1996, Clinton, Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act, another weird wording. The Congress then expands the idea of aggravated felony. This is a big deal because it means that if you have completed a term of imprisonment within the past 15 years for aggravated felony, you are ineligible for naturalization, which is like, wow. I still don't understand this, so don't ask me questions. Google aggravated felony. Upon the passage of this law, states were restricted from offering in-state tuition at public institutions to students who were not legally in the country. Several states subsequently have passed tuition equality laws, and what's good about this time is that you get the government speaking to states on a level of like, okay, we've deputized you in terms of immigration to an extent. So states are sort of have a little more autonomy when it comes to immigration. But that also means that at that time period, depending on who is in power, like you've got a lot of people increasing Border Patrol, you've got a lot of people and qualified immunity, making it so that any sort of biased or prejudiced Border Patrol officer, enforcement official doesn't have to be held accountable for their bias. And you're seeing a lot of imprisonment, a lot of detainment, a lot of deportation. There's also in this act increased number, like I said, increased number of border agents, and then higher penalties on those who have assisted illegal immigrants into the United States, and the 10-year reentry ban on those deported after living in the U.S. illegally for over a year gets instated in that moment. Then we get to 9/11, the recession. I'm not going to go through Obama. I just want you to know, like, we're undoing, like, slowly, like at the slowest pace possible, 100 years, less than 100 years, I would say. Actually, no, 1924, it's 2020. Yeah, roughly 100 years of like extraordinarily restrictive, racist, fear-based immigration law. So whoever comes in, like, if there's a bunch of things that if they didn't happen, my parents wouldn't be here. But like I said, my mother is right now at 68 trying to become a naturalized citizen of this country. And it's taken, she retired 5 years ago. It's a mess. I hope that was not too much and not too convoluted, and that you don't want to die.
Well, it wouldn't be your fault if any of those were the case. Again, not surprising, but surprising. But thank you so much, Sydney, for taking that time to go through all of the incredibly loaded acts and pieces of legislation, and, you know, digging through the history books to share with us. We definitely appreciate that, and I definitely took away some little fun facts, one of which was the 1924 when the Native Americans could be actual citizens, which, I mean, if you don't know anything, then take that with you now and go share that with a couple of friends. Before we jump into Reclaim Our Happy Hour, Ross, I wanted to ask if you are present still on the line somewhere. I haven't seen your screen because I'm not looking at it, but I wanted to ask, did Biden say anything about ICE, like on his reform or his policies? Was there a mention of ICE or anything like that? I'm curious.
Let's check it out. I just so happen to have it up right now. Let's do a Command F for ICE. Yep. Oh, nope. That's licensing. Vice. Oh, it's going to say Vice a lot. That's a great question. It's not specifically mentioned within his agenda for the Latino community. There might be a broader immigration platform in which it is mentioned, but I'll look that up and see if we include it in our email
recap
blast
or something.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to circle back without
No, that's a great question.
But I definitely was concerned about that sweat bead. Anywho, so as we are nearing the end of our 7th installment of Reclaim Our Vote Weekly here on Wednesday, same link, same time, we'd like to close out our sessions before we lead into our optional discussion portion, if you guys want to stick around. But before we wrap up our hour of discussion here on this forum, we like to highlight a couple of organizations or things that we can all give our happy hour money. Since we're at home and we can't go to the bars, we can actually use our beer money for some good. And Kyle's going to tell us about some organizations that she has handy.
Hi guys. Yes. Ooh, was that that's the Zoom gods. So our first one is definitely going to be JoAnna Mendoza. I'll put in the chat again her donation. I think she had said $20.20, which sounds like an LA cocktail to me. Just one. So if you guys can please donate to her campaign. We're so excited to have her here, and that was just amazing. And continue to follow her. And then our second one is actually going to be, it's a friend of both Carmen and Ross and I's. So basically what happened in Warsaw, Poland, there has been a lot of uprisings for the LGBTQ community, and they've started protesting. And a friend of ours was protesting and assaulted by the police, put in a chokehold. Chuck lost consciousness, was detained overnight, and thankfully was released but suffered some injury, as well as now has a court case coming. And as we know, dynamics and politics are different in Warsaw, so there's a GoFundMe for her, or excuse me, for Chuck. Sorry, I didn't mean to misgender her, for they. And we are just so, Chuck is an incredible human. Chuck worked in the kitchen at John and Vinny's and Kismet. Chuck has traveled the world. Chuck is a great representation of our community. And I hope that you read the story and that you support. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Kyle.
Wow. Yeah. It's always tough when things hit home, you know, hit close to home, but that just shows you just how connected we all are and how jacked up things are all around the world, down the street and to around the world. So, you know, more than ever, it's so important for us to stay connected and continue to meet like this. And again, we all appreciate you guys for returning and telling your friends and doing what you can to make this hour here special and empowering and impactful. And because you guys come back is the reason why we continue to do this. So again, thank you for joining us here. And thank you, Kyle, for sharing those some definite things that we need to be donating to. I know that I will. So thank you so much. And then with that, I don't know if Ross, if you had anything that you wanted to close out with, but we can probably go ahead and open up for our discussion. But did you want to say something before we did that?
Real quick, I did find one small thing about Joseph Robinette Biden and ICE. The quickest thing I found, I'm sure there is more, he is pledging to immediately open up more transparency and make sure that ICE is a lot more transparent about who they're investigating, what tactics they're using, and hold ICE officials accountable for any excessive use of force or any unlawful arrests or detainees. What would be the form of detain that I'm looking for? Detentions? I don't know. Whatever, you know what I'm talking about. So any unlawful that he's gonna make sure that stops. I'm sure there's more, and again, I will put more in. We'll put more in the email blast, but yeah, that's it.
Better than nothing. So I'm thankful that something's there because they need to do something about that. But anywho, we'll go ahead and stop our recording now, and that way everybody can have open discussion of whatever if anybody has any